Patrick Basham, Director of the Democracy Institute, Washington, D.C. The point of the paper is to explain to an Asian audience, as Asian governments look at the regulation of e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products, what are the regulatory lessons that Asia can learn from the Western experience. So I look at most of the major Commonwealth countries, as well as the United States of America, where each one has pursued a different path to this point, and try to draw general lessons that I think might be applicable in the Asian context. The most important lesson learned from the Western experience, I think, for Asia, is that it is a mistake to ban these products. Prohibition is not going to achieve public health goals. In fact, I think it's going to hurt public health in Asia if there are bans. And in fact, bans would be a missed opportunity, because I believe these products, which I refer to, I coined the term exits in the report, because I believe these products are a way of people exiting from smoking to less harmful behavior and habits, that these products are going to lengthen the lives of people who currently smoke, which is a critical public health outcome and objective that can be met. And what we see is that in each of these countries, as they follow different paths, they've each individually, on their own time, without outside interference, recognized that overall these products, these exit products, are a net public health benefit and therefore need to be regulated rather than banned. Now, the type of regulation, it depends on what each individual country thinks is the best way forward. And there are many types. There's a menu of regulatory options that I outline in the report. It's important, I think, that Asian countries choose the regulatory model and path that's best for them and not imposed from the outside, and that they look at this menu and realize that there are many ways of achieving the same public health outcome. It's absolutely critical in a healthy democracy that the regulatory policy-making process be conducted in a certain way. What's the most important thing in a healthy democracy is the nature of the policy-making process, how the regulations are actually made. That's even more important than the outcome. We're all interested in the outcome. We all have views, strong views often, very strong views on what that outcome is. But whether it's public health or any other area of regulation, the process is the most important thing. And what a healthy process is, I believe, is one that, first of all, includes as many stakeholders as possible. So in the area of exits and e-cigarettes, etc., we're talking about not just public health, which must have a place, and the scientific community, but also industry and also critically consumer groups, those who are using the products or may wish to use the product. Everyone needs to be involved. Everyone needs to have their views heard. Now, there will be an outcome that is not approved by everyone. But if you have a healthy process that's open and transparent and involves a true discussion and true debate, then even those who oppose the outcome will be able to recognize and will recognize that it was a fair process that they were involved in. And that means that if we don't have the outcome we desire, we can at least accept that the process was reasonable and democratic, and therefore everyone is more likely to actually buy in and support the eventual outcome. I believe that if that process is all the things I've described and looks at the evidence, is evidence-based, the evidence from all of the stakeholders, I then think that in the case of public health, and specifically in the case of exits, e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products, then a fair democratic process will produce an outcome that says, let's regulate these products, let's not ban them. But that outcome, as I say, is secondary to a healthy process in the first place. I strongly believe that the recent ban on e-cigarettes imposed by the Indian government is a very, very unwise decision. It's unwise because I think it's very, very bad news for public health in India. If it is carried out and implemented, it condemns millions and millions of Indians to a premature death because they will not have the opportunity to move from smoking traditional combustible cigarettes, which are so harmful, as we all know, to far less harmful products like e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products. I think it's a decision that has been made, I'm sure with the best of intentions, but been made prematurely because I do not believe a democratic policy-making regulatory process has been initiated or been experienced in India. If it were to be initiated, I think the government would reach a very different outcome. The ideal approach to harm reduction through ends or exits, as I call them, is to recognize that there is no perfect solution to the problem of traditional combustible cigarette smoking. We all want to do something about it. We all want less of it. We all want the benefit to public health that would accrue from that change. But to do so, we cannot realistically say everyone who currently smokes must quit and must stop smoking. That is simply not going to happen. The way to transfer people from being current smokers to less harmful products is to recognize that we can reduce the harm from tobacco. And the two obvious ways today, thanks to innovation and technology from industry, is to permit people the choice between an array of well-regulated e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products where the government protects the consumer in all kinds of ways to ensure that these are legitimate, above-board, legal products that adults can reasonably choose between. If the government permits Indians that kind of choice, then I think reduced harm will be the outcome. That's the experience elsewhere in the world. There's absolutely no reason to think that tobacco harm reduction cannot be introduced and be equally successful in India. When I began researching this report, I thought that the key lesson I would be communicating to a country like India was that the British experience was the model to follow, because the British very early on, the government, the public health community, very early on decided that these products were the way forward and should be legal and regulated and should be encouraged. However, during my research, I concluded that there's actually a better lesson for India. Not that the British lesson experience isn't valuable, it is, but I think the Canadian and the New Zealand experiences are actually even more valuable. The reason I say that is that in both cases, in Canada and New Zealand, the governments initially took an approach more similar to what has happened in India, where their immediate default position was, well, we're concerned about these products, we're not sure about them, so we're going to prohibit them. We're not going to allow people to experience them and use them. However, because in both of those countries, there are, I think, relatively healthy policy-making processes. Not perfect, but relatively healthy. What has happened is that both governments, New Zealand and Canadian, have looked at the evidence as it has accumulated both in their countries and around the world and recognized that their decision to ban these products was premature, and that they've now included all the stakeholders, they've looked at all of the evidence and recognized that they made a mistake. And it's very difficult for a government to acknowledge they've made a mistake and to change their mind. But that is what a mature government does, that is what smart politicians do, and that's what happens in a healthy democracy. So both the New Zealand government and the Canadian government said in recent years, look, we made a mistake, but we think there's a path here that's progressive, that's cutting edge, that's going to help our people in terms of public health. And so they've both now legalized many, if not most, of these products and are now beginning to encourage their use. That is, I think, the most applicable example and model for the Indian government. It is perfectly reasonable to hold up your hand and say, we made a mistake, we did it for the best reasons, but now we realize there's a better path and that we're going to follow the path of, for example, the Canadian or New Zealand governments on e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products.